The excellent PR of the papacy has presented him as a people's person who cooks his own food and takes the bus like a commoner, and most of the world press have already praised him. But there is a very dark, unrepentant chapter of his life that won't die that easily, that time and most of the corporate-controlled Western media have glossed over: his role in the 1970s dirty war in Argentina. A human rights lawyer accused him of war crimes as documented in the LA Times of April 1st, 2005. But this has been sadly overlooked. 30,000 people were killed in that dark episode of Argentine history, and recently classified documents shows the United States gave full backing of that coup. A Catholic priest, Christian von Wernich, has already been jailed for his complicity of the murders, as well as the president of Argentina, Jorge Rafael Fidela. But who is the man in the top left who is giving him mass? It was the highest ranking Jesuit provincial in Argentina, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the current and newly elected pope. In both the Vietnam and Argentine wars, the Jesuits have only intensified the conflict. Pope Francis I's coat of arms bears the Jesuit symbol IHS. The man behind the Jesuits was a Spanish Basque soldier, Don Inigo de Recalde, who founded the Jesuits. After being wounded in a war, he had an hallucinatory mystical experience, and he laternized his name from Inigo to Ignatius, which means to ignite. While studying in France, he recruited a company of young impressionable minds, and in 1534 the Jesuits were founded in France, where it was officially approved by a papal bull in Italy in 1540 by Pope Paul III. The Jesuits' modus operandi is that in order to control the policy of the world and future generations, you educate the children of today in medieval secular Catholicism, as the late French scholar Edmond Price has confirmed. The good fathers, as is well known, are just masters in the art of keeping up with their former pupils and in following them in life and giving them their support. Needless to say, they expect their pupils to reciprocate. On the official app of the White House, Jesuit priest Charles Curry says that Jesuit-educated students are in strategic areas of influence all over the world. John Brennan, the newly elected director of the CIA. Janet Napolitano, 3rd United States Secretary of Homeland Security. John Kerry, United States Secretary of State. Dennis McDonough, White House Chief of Staff. Mark Thompson, CEO of the New York Times and a former Director General of the BBC. Michael O'Leary, CEO of airline Ryanair. Peter Sutherland, Chairman of Goldman Sachs International, the London School of Economics and Financial Advisor to the Vatican. Mario Draghi, President of the European Central Bank. Emilio Botin, CEO of Spanish bank Santander. And Herman Van Rompuy, the first and current President of the European Council. And in this picture you can see him standing on the left, and seated under the pillar is the Superior General of the Jesuits, Adolfo Nicolas, who can also be seen with Jesuit-educated priest Antonio Menini, the papal ambassador to Great Britain. Although this plaque is talking about Franciscan nuns, it does sound similar to the Jesuits' experience, banned by the land of their birth. The Jesuits have been expelled from over 100 countries all over the world, including the Vatican itself by Pope Clement XIV in 1773. The reason for this, their philosophy, the end justifies the means, has encouraged Jesuit warfare to crush Protestantism. Diego Lainez, the second Superior General of the Jesuits, orchestrated the ethnic cleansing of Protestants in France in 1572. French King Louis XIV in 1685 was instructed by his Jesuit confessor François de la Chaise to force the Protestants to either join Catholicism or ethnically cleanse them from France, and that's exactly what he did. A film entitled Elizabeth the Golden Age was released in 2007, describing the Protestant defeat of the Catholic Navy, the Spanish Armada, and the Jesuit plot against Queen Elizabeth I. Elizabeth's inner circle was headed by the father of British intelligence, Sir Francis Walsingham. He had a spy network that stretched from London throughout Europe into Tripoli within the Ottoman Empire. And it was this network in the Muslim world which not only led to the defeat of the Armada, but also the capture of 125 Jesuit terrorists who were plotting to kill Elizabeth I, where one escaped, Robert Parsons. But his fellow terrorists, Edmund Campion and Mary, Queen of Scots, were killed. But Mary's son James Stewart absolutely hated the Jesuits. He said, "For the Jesuits are the worst and most seditious fellows in the world." Why did he say that? Guy Fawkes is the most famous terrorist in history. He has now turned into an icon of global revolution thanks to Alan Moore's graphic novel turned movie V for Vendetta. But the real overseer of the famous gunpowder plot was not Guy Fawkes, but a Jesuit whose confession is preserved in London's National Archives, Henry Garnet. Peter Canese and Peter Faber founded the German Jesuit Institute Ingolstadt, where King Ferdinand II was educated in Jesuit warfare that led to the Jesuits' 30 Years' War in the 1600s. But as documented in a very rare book, The Vatican Against Europe, by the late French scholar Edmond Paris, the Jesuits were instrumental in another 30 Years' War. In the Times of London during World War I, it documents how the German war effort was fully supported by the Jesuits to crush Protestant Britain. But when that failed, the Superior General of the Jesuits, Polish priest Vladimir Ledochowski, hatched another plan to merge the continent of Europe together by war with a Jesuit-educated student, Eugenio Pacelli, who was to execute this bloody Jesuit agenda, as the London Daily Mirror newspaper of 1944 has confirmed, and even more recently in London's Mail on Sunday. While a cardinal, Pacelli signed 2 concordats that led to both World War I and to World War II. And not surprising, his top defender is a German Jesuit, Peter Gumpel. Who assassinated President Abraham Lincoln was behind the American Civil War. The testimonies of General Thomas A. Harris, Samuel Morse, and a former French-Canadian Catholic priest, Charles Chiniquy, in his book 50 Years in the Church of Rome, exposed both the Pope and the Jesuits of siding with the Confederate pro-slavery South during the American Civil War. Yes, without Romanism, the last awful civil war would have been impossible. Jeff Davis would never have dared to attack the North had he not had the assurance from the Pope that the Jesuits, the bishops, the priests, and the whole people of the Church of Rome, under the name and mask of democracy, would help him. Lincoln's assassins plotted in the house of Catholic Mary Surratt. In the film The Conspirator, director Robert Redford does mention Catholic priest Jacob Walter, but he ignores that when Surratt went to the scaffold to be hanged, she was assisted by her Jesuit confessor Bernardine Wiggott, whose Jesuit superior Charles Stonestreet testified at her trial. When the bounty was out for Lincoln's killers, Mary Surratt's son, Jesuit-educated John Surratt, had fled the United States, and where was he to be found? In the 3rd Company of the Papal Suaves, the Pope's personal guards, in Rome. Lincoln's assassin John Wilkes Booth was killed in a shootout, but it took place in the house where he was in hiding and was protected by a student of the Jesuits, Dr. Samuel Mudd. But where was Dr. Samuel Mudd educated? In the most powerful education institution on earth that has covertly shaped American foreign policy for almost a century, Georgetown University, that was founded by Jesuit John Carroll. In 1919, Jesuit friar Edmund Walsh set up the very first diplomatic school in the United States, where it has trained and still trains United States political leaders. President Eisenhower visits Georgetown President Edward Bunn, and President Reagan with Jesuit Timothy Healy. For Reagan's Secretary of State Alexander Haig was a Knight of Malta educated at Georgetown. Senior advisor to President Nixon, Ford, and Reagan, Pat Buchanan. Former warmongering President Bill Clinton. The directors of the CIA, both George Tenet in the Bush administration and the last head of the CIA, David Petraeus, in the Obama administration, and retired warlord Robert Gates are all Georgetown Jesuit trained. It also invites warmongers to lecture and has others on its staff. Georgetown professor, Vietnamese Catholic Viet Dinh, is the chief architect of the United States Patriot Act. With the most powerful education institution on earth, and with the Jesuit priests steering the ship of the papacy, where the Jesuits have meddled in wars for almost 500 years, only common sense will tell you what is in store for the planet.